Hi everyone, I recently crocheted all of the animal granny squares in this book, and today I'm going to be making a little crochet vlog of me putting the squares together to make a baby blanket. I did already finish one of the blankets, so in this video I'm going to be making the second blanket using the rest of the animal granny squares. So here I have all the squares that I need for the blanket, and what I'm going to do is start by just kind of sketching out the layout that I want the squares to be in, and then I'm going to slip stitch the rows together. So here's my little drawing of how I'm going to be laying out my squares. Basically, I'm alternating between animal squares and plain squares, and then within the plain squares, I'm alternating between white squares and blue squares. But all of the different squares have different colored borders, so I just drew out kind of how I want the colors to be for that. So I've separated my squares into 5 different little piles, and it is one pile for each row of the blanket. What I'm going to be doing is slip stitching the rows together and then slip stitching the columns together after that. And I'm going to be using this blue Bernat yarn to slip stitch the rows together. And basically how it's going to work for me slip stitching the squares together is I'm going to be taking all of the squares from the top row one at a time. So this is the first square of the top row, and then this is the first square of the second row. And I'm going to slip stitch these together along the edge. And then after that, I'll do the second square from the top row and the second square from the second row. This is what it looks like after I've slip stitched the first 2 squares together. And I'm just going to keep going across the first and second row until I get to the end of that row, and then I'll give you an update. So it's about 20 minutes later and I finished slip stitching the first row to the second row. I'm going to just keep doing the same things by slip stitching the second row to the third row to the fourth row, then the fourth row to the fifth row, and then I'll let you know when I'm done with that. So now it's the next day from where I left off, but I finished slip stitching across all the rows and then down all the columns of the blanket, and here's what it's looking like so far. So here is a little bit of a close-up, but basically I slip stitched across all the same way for each row, and then I slip stitched down all the columns for each row. For the next step, I'm going to be adding a border of 2 rows of half double crochet, and I'm going to be using the same blue color for the border as well. So it's been about an hour now and I just finished doing the border. So basically what I did is 1 half double crochet in each stitch along the side of the square, and then I also did 1 half double crochet in between each of the squares. And then for the corners what I did was 2 half double crochets, a chain 1, and then 2 half double crochets, and all of that goes into the corner space here. So I just did 2 rows of that, and that's all I'm going to be doing for the border. Now I'm going to sort of tuck away and tie off all of the ends, and then cut off some of the ends because I'm not going to be fully weaving in all of the ends since I'm adding a fabric backing. So now I've finished tying off all of the ends and weaving them in as much as I'm going to be doing for the purposes of this project. So this is what the front is looking like. And this is what the back looks like right now. The next step in finishing this blanket is going to be adding this fabric to the back of the blanket. How I'm going to be lining it is basically just using a darning needle. I'm using one that has a bit of a sharper edge here so that it'll be able to actually go through the fabric. And then I'm just going to be using that with the same yarn that I used for the border. So now it's day 4 of putting together this blanket, and I've lined about half of it so far with this fabric. So how I figured out how to line the back of the blanket, I literally searched on TikTok how to line crochet baby blanket, and this one video came up that I really liked. So I'm going to find that video for you and I'm going to put it in the description of this video so you can see that video, and it gives a bit of a better explanation for it. And I'm just going to sort of show you a close-up of how I'm lining it. And here is my setup for lining the blanket. I have my darning needle and the yarn that I use for the border. And as you can see there, you can see which stitch I just went through on the blanket there. What I'm going to do is skip the next stitch and go through the second stitch to the right. And you go through the layer of fabric and then through the stitch on the crochet piece. It did just get a little bit tangled here, so I'm just untangling it. And then going through from the crochet side to the fabric side, I'm going right into the next stitch instead of skipping a stitch. So you don't skip a stitch, you just go right into the next stitch and go through the crochet and the fabric. So once again, you can see the stitch that we just went through. Now I'm going to skip a stitch and go through the second stitch. And now I'm going to go right into the next stitch with the darning needle through to the fabric side. And I just repeated this process all around the entire blanket. It's now the 5th day of putting this blanket together, and I finished lining the back of the blanket with fabric, so it is officially done. And here is the big reveal. Thank you so much for following along with this video, and let me know what your favorite animal square was in the comments below.